Okay, so today we're making our Christmas cushion, and I'm using this Big Value Super Chunky by King Cole. It's a nice quality and it's also got great colours, obviously the Christmas colours that we need. So I'm making the main part of the cushion in cream. So you'll need an 8mm hook and, as I say, super chunky yarn. Okay, so first thing to do is really straightforward, this pattern. Great for beginners. So we're going to chain 36. So I've got my slip knot there ready on the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So try to make sure you don't make your chains too tight, because we don't want it to pull up the edge of the cushion. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on now chaining until I've got 36. Right, so I've got my 36 chain. So we are simply going to single crochet into each one. So we go in the second chain from hook, so we've got that turning chain, and just single crochet, and we're just going to go, as I say, into each one. So for those of you who've never done single crochet, we insert the hook in the stitch, then you yarn over till you've got 2 loops on hook, then you yarn over and pull through those 2. Do a couple more, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on hook, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so as you can see, it's quite a nice short stitch, and in this chunky yarn it's going to be quite nice and dense for the cushion, so you won't see the cushion pad through the cushion. Now, one thing to note, if you've not really worked in single crochet before, or in UK terms double crochet, when you're working into a chain, it does have a tendency to twist, so don't let that scare you. Once you've worked a few rows, that issue won't be a problem anymore. It's nothing to do with your tension. I find it just always does it when I'm working single crochet into chain. So yeah, once you've got a bigger piece, it shouldn't matter, and it certainly won't matter when we come to join the cushion together. That'll pull it all into position. Right, okay, so we'll finish off that row, and I'll just talk you through turning for the next row. Right, so we'll have 35 single crochet by the time we've worked into each stitch. So at the end now, so we're going to turn and chain 1, and this chain doesn't count as a stitch, so we're going to go into that very first stitch. So we'll keep 35. So 1, 2, 3, and if you've not done this stitch before, or you've never crocheted before and you're doing this as a beginner, you're going to go under the V that now sits on the top to make the same stitch as we did into the chain. So yarn over, 2 loops on hook, yarn over, pull through 2, insert your hook under both loops, so turn the work onto its edge to see both loops, and then continue. So we're going to do this now for another 24 rows. Yeah, so this is row 2, and then we've got another 24, so we'll have 26 altogether to make the front panel of the cushion. So what I'll do, I will just come back to you at the end of this row, just in case you are a beginner and you're unsure which stitch to work into when you get to the other end of this row. Okay, so when you come to the end of that second row, you'll see that you've only got 1 V, if you turn the work on its edge, left to work into, and this little loop that's crossing over the end is the turning chain that we don't work into. So this V will be your last stitch. So work into there with your last single crochet, and if you want, you can just count back to make sure you've got 35. Turn, and it's exactly the same now as we did on the last row. Chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, so you're going into the V that's directly opposite, or sorry, adjacent to that chain you've just made. insert your hook, and then yarn over, pull through 2, and we'll carry on creating these rows. So what you can see is that in between each stitch we've got a nice convenient little hole, but because we're using a fairly small hook for the yarn, it's going to be nice and compact. But these are going to come in handy for when we make our word on the front, which I'm going to show you next. Okay, so do the rest of your rows. Let's come back when we've got 26 rows. Apologies, it wasn't 26 rows, that's for the back panel. 42 rows is what you want to be doing for the front panel. Okay, so I've done that now. It's looking a bit like this. So you'll see now we almost have a sort of chart or grid that we can work into, provided by all these little gaps in between and underneath the single crochet stitches. So that's going to be really helpful, and it's going to act a bit like an embroidery, a piece of embroidery cloth when we come to do our embroidery on top. So what we want to do now is make 2 more panels almost exactly the same way. This time we are going to do 26 rows. So when we've done that, we'll come back and we'll have a look at putting the embroidery on this front panel. Right, so when we look at the chart and our completed first panel, we can count the number of rows and number of stitches, and then we can plot out where we're going to put our letters. So the first part of the X is 4 stitches in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So don't count the, sorry, I can't see that. Don't count the turning chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would be this hole next to that stitch there. And then the top of the X is going to be 16 rows down. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So 16 down and 1, 2, 3, 4 in starts in this gap here. So I'm just going to put a pin across that hole so that I know where to start. So we're going to do the same thing for each point of the X. So we're just going to plot out where each bit goes. And then when we come to do our surface slip stitch technique, we can follow those guides. Right, so I've plotted out the key points of the X now. So I'm going to take my red yarn, and I've made a slip knot, which I'm going to put behind that first point. Take my hook, push it through that hole, and then bring that loop from the back to the front. So now I can take out that marker. You don't have to use pins, you could use little bits of other coloured yarn, but probably a bit thinner than the super chunky, to mark those holes if you want to. Or you can even just use a pen if you're confident that you're going to cover it up. Right, okay. So we're going to travel down now to this point here. So what we do is we take our hook, go into that next diagonal hole, come round to the back and take the yarn through, and then just like you would do with an ordinary slip stitch, you can take that new loop through the old loop, and that will then lay on top as a stitch to form the embroidery. If it looks a little bit loose, you can just pull the other end of the slip knot, just get it a bit tightened up. Okay, but make sure not to pull it too tight, because then you could risk bunching up the surface of the cushion. So you want to get it nice and even. Right, so from there we're travelling diagonally into the next hole. We're going to yarn and yarn over, pull through, and then you will just need to use your fingers to just pull through. Okay, so you can see how the surface design is now appearing in this slip stitch technique. So we've got 2 more diagonals till we get to our next marker. It's looking fairly neat and even. So I'm going to take out that next marker and go into that hole where that marker was. So it's a little bit like punch needle embroidery, or even just ordinary embroidery that you're having to come from the back of the piece you're working on. Right, so now that we've reached that point, we can start travelling down this way to this next marker. Okay. So we're going to go in there. Through into the one directly beneath. It doesn't have to be exact this, as long as you plotted out your points, you can travel to the next point whichever way you like. It doesn't have to be plotted out perfectly according to the chart. Okay, so when we get to this next point here, I've marked the bottom part of the vertical stitch. So we want to go straight down from there rather than across, because we want that blunt edge like we've got at the top. Okay, so take that stitch marker out and work into that last one of this side. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to count how many, according to the chart, is in the width of this section, which looking at it is 3. So 1, 2, 3. So I can turn my work and I can just work across now into the next available hole. One, 2, 3. And that's given us the width of that part of the X. So now we need to travel up the same way that we did here to make that vertical stitch now, which is there. Great, and then we're going to duck in to this hole here to make that little extra part of the X. Let's tighten it up slightly. Yeah, so you can see now it's creating that nice surface embroidery. Just every now and then you need to tighten up slightly, as I say, not too much. Okay, so now we're travelling up to this point here. Just take a little bit of time and care, just to make sure you're not splitting the yarn or pulling it too tight or leaving it too loose. Okay, so what we need to do now is mirror this part here. So we can see that's the very outer edge of the X, and they've got 1, 2, 3 stitches. So now we need to arrive down there to be able to travel that way. Okay, so we're going to go diagonal. A little way. And then we're going to come back into this hole we were in earlier to meet up with that other part, and then travel straight down into that one below. Okay, so now we've got the main part of the X, we're going to go across. So I'm going to turn it round again. So I'm going to go across for 3. One. Getting a bit trickier now as it gets a bit further in to the design, because we're on the one hand at the back, so we're going to have to kind of bunch up the top panel a little bit there. Okay, 1, 2, and then take out your marker, and 3. Fab. Right, turn it around so we can see we've got the main part of the X there now. Just tweeze it out slightly, and then we're going to start working up again. It's going to go up 1, in 1, and then we're going to travel diagonally to this other marker here. Okay, because I can take that one out now. And then we're going up to here. So we're going to stop where we get to there and work vertically up. Let's check I've got that one right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so we're going into that from there to there. So up we go, diagonal again. Oops, definitely split the yarn there. Trying to do it by feel so I don't have to keep turning it upside down on the camera. But of course you can keep turning it over to check that you're not splitting the yarn. Something strange happened there. I think I've got 2 lots of yarn. Let's pull it back through. Take that marker out. Ah, I know what's happened. The tail end has got involved. Okay, carry on. Hopefully don't bring the tail through this time. Let's keep it out of the way. You'll probably be able to do this much quicker than me. It always takes a bit longer when you're trying to make sure you can see on the camera what I'm doing. Get in there. Okay, so now we want to work across to make that little squared off part of the X. And split it again. And then up. and then finally into that last hole at the top. Excuse me. All right. Right, so nearly done with our X. So you see it's looking quite nice. So we're going to finish off by travelling down and across. So again, we've got 3, so it's sort of matching up with the bottom part of the X. Obviously X is a symmetrical letter. Although in this font it is quite stylised, which I like about it for a Christmas decor. 2, 3. Bit easier travelling straight lines rather than diagonal. All right. So now we're going to drop down 1. Go away, tail. And in 1. And then diagonally into the middle. One more. Okay, and then we're ready to do the last part of the X, which is travelling up. Up. Across. Across again. And up. And the final 3 stitches across. 1, 2, 3. Oof, we made it. Right, so the X is done. Probably just does need a little bit of stretching out slightly. So you've got 3 more letters to do in the same way. So take your pins or your little bits of yarn, plot out the points of the next letter, and so on and so on. Hopefully you'll manage that now after you've seen me do that one. Right, so I've just finished the M now. So I just wanted to show you how to finish off. So we want to take the loop that's on the hook through to the other side. Hook back in and then simply finish off like you usually would. Snip off the tail. The good thing about a cushion is you don't really need to sew the tail end in, because you can just cut them short like I've done there. Do 2 knots to make sure it doesn't come out, because it's never going to be visible. Which is always nice, not to have to sew in ends. And then I just tie the 2 tails together, like I say, with a couple of knots, because you're always going to finish where you started, so your 2 tails will be at the same point, and then snip it off like that. So we've got 2 letters, 2 to go. Right, so mine's done. A word. And you will need to use a little bit of artistic license, because when you're especially travelling in diagonals, some of the diagonals, like with the A, are very, very slight, which unfortunately is not possible on this method because we were using the holes that are there. So if it's a very slight diagonal, you're going to have to change it to straight. Okay, so I've managed that quite well, I think. If you don't like this really chunky yarn, you can use, so this is super chunky, you could use a chunky in the red if you wanted the letters to be a little bit more open. But yeah, once the cushion pad's in there, it's going to stretch out the word anyway. So we do want to allow for that to happen a little bit. But yeah, quite pleased with that. Okay, so now we need to make the back panels, which, as I say, is exactly the same as making the front panels, but you just want to do 26 rows this time, 2 panels, and then we'll come back to join it all together. Right, so now we should have a front panel and 2 back panels. Okay, so what we need to do now is just join them all together. So we're not going to turn this through because the yarn's so bulky. We're just going to lay one side on top of the other with the wrong sides together. And we're just going to work around the outer edge rather than seaming it all and turning it through, because that is just too bulky in this kind of yarn. Okay, so what I would suggest is putting the chain edge, so the foundation chain edge, to the outer, to the inner, just so that this side wraps over the other, because it does sit that slightly bit tighter and it'll make for a neater fold over. And when you come to join these edges here, you'll have 2 real stitches to work through rather than a row of stitches and a row of chain, which I always think is easier as well because they're about the same tension. Okay, so I've put that side there, and then I'm going to put my chain edge from this one at that end as well. So because you work backwards and forwards in rows, there's not really a right or wrong side to this, which is helpful. Okay, so when you've got it all lined up, we're going to seam all around the edge using single crochet. So you probably, if you know me well, you know I hate sewing, so I avoid sewing anything like the plague. Just hand sewing, can't stand. Okay, so best thing to do with these really bulky areas where you're going to be going through 3 lots of layers is to pin them, because otherwise they're just going to come out of alignment and it's not going to look very good. So use either pins or big darning needles, because that's the one reason why to use maybe big darning needles instead, because this is such a bulky project that pins are sometimes a bit too thin. Okay, so I'm just going to put one close to that edge and close to this edge, and hopefully I won't bleed on the project. Right, so that's secure. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Don't worry about these loose ends, because obviously they'll be trapped inside the cushion. So yeah, making cushions is nice because you don't really have to fasten off any ends at all. Okay, so just take that, fasten that one in with a pin and one more. And that should be all you need really to stop them coming out of alignment. So we're going to start on the easy side, which is where we can just join the stitches together. And it's up to you what you do with these ends. You can either poke them inside as you go along, or you can trap them into the edge stitching. I think pushing them inside is a better option, because sometimes they can poke out again if you've tried to trap them into the edge. But as I say, we're going to start with an easier edge first. So I'm going to start with this edge, which will have exactly the same number of stitches, and we can work on that together. Okie doke. So because we're not going to be making a seam that needs to be turned through, we're not going to use slip stitch. We're going to use single crochet, so we get a bit of an edging, or the first part of the edging. So we just need to decide. I'm trying to decide whether to use red or green for the edging. I think I'm going to use green. Okay, so I'm just going to make a slip knot. And I've already poked the hook through both stitches. So the V on the top of that stitch and the V on the top of that stitch. so that we're going to join those 2 layers together. So I'm going to take my slip knot and take it through. Okay, and so then I'm going to make 1 chain, and then start the single crochet into the same space through both layers. And again, try not to pull it up too tight, just so it won't bunch up along the edges. So if you can see what I'm doing there, I'm just going in through the corresponding stitches. So you will have the same number of stitches. The panels are identical. So make sure you line them up. Don't allow them to become misaligned. And then you will get a really nice neat edge. Okay, so we're just going to do this all the way along this top edge, which will be nice and straightforward because these are the top of the stitches. When it gets a bit trickier is going down the sides, because then we're working into the row ends, which isn't quite as easy. And especially when it comes to the very bulky area where the 3 layers are. But it's not impossible, so I'm going to show you that next. So I'm going to leave you to finish doing this edge, and once I get to the other end, I'll show you how to turn the corner and how to work into the row ends. Okay, so when you come to a corner, you just want to make sure you put 2 single crochets into that corner, just to stop it pulling when you want to come down the other side. Okay, so I've done 1. I'll do another one. Okay, and now as you can see, I'm working down the side in the row ends now. So it's no exact science to this, but you want to keep the stitches as even as possible, so they look the same as the ones that have gone into the basic stitches, the top of the stitches. So I'm going to choose this part, and as you can see, I've got matching row ends. You just want to make sure they stay lined up the same way that your stitches did. Okay, so pick up a loop. Try not to go too near to the edge if you can, just stops it pulling too much into a sort of hole on the edge. Okay, so I've put on there, and the next one I'm going to go into this gap here. So it's kind of like the bottom of the row. And I'm trying to just put 1 stitch in each row end, because that's quite nice and even. But as I say, it's not really an exact science on the side of your work. Just got to try and make it look as neat as you can. So again, we've got that hole there, that's quite convenient. And we're just going to do the same thing all the way along. I will come back to you, oh, sorry about the dog. I will come back to you, oh dear, when we get to the thicker part to show you how to work through that bit. Okay. Okay, so I've done a few there. I'm going to carry on till I get to this thicker part. As you can see, the 3 layers to work through, and just show you how I sort of manage that. It's a little bit tricky, but it's not too difficult. Okay, so I've just come to the first part of the 3 thicknesses. So I'm going to put my hook in here, and then make sure I pick up that middle layer, and then that very end layer. So you can see where the slip knot was for the first round, or sorry, the slip knot was for the end of that round when we were working that way. So I've just picked up the end of that row, and then we've got 3 layers to bring that yarn back through and make our single crochet. So as I say, it's a little bit fiddly, but not impossible. You're just having to make sure you're catching every layer of the 3, and just make sure they stay lined up so you've not got a sort of angled seam at the back. That's not really a seam, it's sort of a flap. It's an envelope cushion, so they refer to it as an envelope fastening, if you will. It's not really a fastening, it's sort of an overlap technique that is a really good one. You don't have to put press studs on if you don't want, but you can if you do want to. But they overlap quite nicely to make sure your cushion pad doesn't show. Sometimes just going to split the yarn a bit as you try and come through all those layers. Usually with your nail you can just push that a little bit off and we're through. So as I say, it is just a little bit fiddly. So you can see that I've managed to catch all 3 layers in there. It's looked quite neat, and you can see the seam on the back. Okay, so I'll just let you carry on until you get to that last corner. And once we've done the single crochet all the way around, because your other side is going to be easier to work into because it's the end of the stitches again. Once we've done that one round all the way around, we're going to do reverse single crochet to make a nice sort of bound looking edge on the cushion. Okay, so we'll get to that point and we'll do that next. Okay, so I've come to that last corner. So you can see where the single crochet, the last single crochet is, and then where the first one was. So I'm just going to put another single crochet into that corner to just create that turning, that sort of ease to be able to turn the corner. And then I'm just going to slip stitch into the first single crochet. Okay, so now we're ready to work backwards across the row. So if you haven't done reverse single crochet, or it's also known as crab stitch, I'm going to show you that now. So we're going to chain 1, and this is going to feel quite strange because we're actually going to go into the stitch that we've just done. So that's the slip stitch, there's the last single crochet. So try and keep your yarn over this side, keep it on the hook as well, so keep your finger on that loop. Push it in as if you're going to do a single crochet, working from right to left. Yarn over, pull through. And then you'll get this weird kind of twist going on, but you will still have 2 loops on hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. And that's just going to look very odd at first. If you've never done this before, you're just going to think, what a mess. It just looks like a twisted knot, which it does, you're right. But as we travel across, I think you'll be really satisfied with the result, because it does leave a really nice rope effect edge. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing into the next one. So it is just a single crochet. This is the point where you need to make sure the yarn doesn't end up the wrong way as you pull it through. So we don't have to wrap it round. We just have to pull it through. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat today. Yarn over, pull through 2. So you might see that sort of nice rope effect edge starting now. So again, keep that yarn, working yarn over to that side, keep that loop on your hook. Insert your hook into the next single crochet, yarn over, 2 loops on hook, yarn over, pull through. I'm just going to do a few more so you get to see the effect. Okay, and I think you'll find this quite satisfying, this part, because obviously now we're not working into row ends, we've got a nice stitch to work into. It's going to be much more satisfying to do. Okay, so once you've got the knack, you're just going to go all the way around. Oh, there's some geese flying over. I don't know if you can hear that on the camera. Okay. Right. Right, so I think I've done enough there to show that lovely finish. So it's quite silky looking. Like I say, it's like a rope effect. Okay, so one problem you might encounter when you're doing this is everything's getting really stretched out and it's
it's not looking like a nice square. Don't worry, because at the end you can shape it to a certain extent. And when you put the cushion pad in, that's going to take away a lot of that wrinkling. And it will allow for the cushion pad to fit inside the cushion cover. So it's better than it being all neat at this stage and then being really stretched out when the cushion goes in. It's better to have a slight wavy edge, and then that'll be eliminated once the cushion's in there. If it is really, really, really frilly, you might need to have a look back and see if you put too many single crochet stitches in which case you might want to just undo and make less. So I'll show you the back now, so we can see that we've got this envelope fastening. It's overlapped, so it's overlapped by a long way, so that even if you've got a really, really thick, full cushion pad, it's not going to spread open. But as I say, if you want to, you can put some press studs on the inside, and just that'll make sure it doesn't gape. Right, so I'll show you once I've finished that edge all the way around, and then finally I'll show you with the cushion padding. Right, so I've just got one more stitch to do in that reverse single crochet, and then I've come all the way back round to my first stitch. So I'm just going to slip stitch into that last space. Okay, and then fasten off. So once you've fastened off, you'll then be able to put your cushion pad in, which I've already done. Right, so just snip off, leaving a longish end, sew in, and then pull it tight, and you can just rearrange those last couple of stitches to hide that fastened off bit. And that was pretty neat now, that ropey edge. And as you can see, I've put my cushion pad in now, and it's looking quite nice. And just to show you what the back looks like, so you've got this nice overlap which creates the opening so you can get your cushion pad out and wash your cushion cover. But we have made quite a decent overlap there, but if you are wanting to put some press studs on the inside, by all means go for it, but you don't really need to, which is the good thing about this pattern.